Hume. Senator Singh.
Well, what a shock it has all been the last 24 hours since the delivery of the Turnbull Government's 2017 budget. Well, we know that they were going to try as hard as possible to walk away from their 2014 budget train wreck, but where they ended up has completely left Australia in a position of thinking that this government not only had it already lost its way, but now it is just a wolf in sheep's clothing. Because given any chance at all, any chance, it would return to those unfair cuts and awful outcomes that it made in its budget of 2014. Why do we know that? Because they have made it very clear that the only reason that they have delivered this kind of budget, this budget where, yes, they have stolen some of Labor's policies, although only half-baked them, the reason they've provided this kind of budget that they have said themselves is because they couldn't get their unfair budget through the Senate. So given any opportunity for this Senate to change its makeup, they would go back to type and they would bring back that train wreck of a 2014 budget. And we all know the unfair zombie measures that were involved in that. Unemployed people having to wait 6 months for any income support, paid parental leave cuts, family tax benefit cuts, a range of zombie measures that were going to hurt the most vulnerable of our society. So do not be fooled, Australians. This budget is only here in place because it couldn't get its unfair 2014 budget through the Senate. Now, we have to dig down because the Prime Minister continues, and the Treasurer continues to use this word fairness. It's decided to use a Labor word, the Labor word of fairness. Now, in using that word, it is being incredibly untruthful because this budget is not fair. It is not fair in the areas of education, it is not fair on health, it is not fair on housing affordability. In all of these areas, it is trying to tell Australians we have done something fair. OK, perhaps if you look at 2014 and you look at this budget, they may think themselves that they have done something fair. But that just goes to the heart of the fact that they actually don't know what fairness means. Now, to say you're going to lift the Medicare freeze and say that that is fair, but then not actually do it, but then make people wait another year, 2 years, 3 years before they can actually get that support, that is not fair. It's all about the detail when it comes to this budget. You know, the gloss soon wears off once you start digging beneath the words of, fairness that they keep using. And once you keep digging down, you realise that the government hasn't walked away from its ideological obsession to give $50 billion of company tax cuts to the most wealthy in this country, that the ideology of trickle-down economics to create jobs and growth, as they talk about, is still there, even though it's an outdated and flawed economic policy objective, and the fact that they have still left in place a number of other areas that are going to hurt some of our most vulnerable. Now let's look at the way that they have tackled education. Now, finally, they've recognised the importance of needs-based funding, and I give them credit for recognising the importance of needs-based funding. That's ensuring that every child in every school gets every opportunity for the best education, no matter what their postcode, no matter their circumstances. But that will only work if it's properly funded, and we know that the government still left a big $22 billion hole in the Gonski needs-based funding formula that Labor put forward when we were in government. So that's a big fail there. There's no fairness there, it's a failure. The other failure is in housing affordability, something that is facing this country in such a big way for this current generation and the next generation. Nothing there for them, no negative gearing changes. no capital gains tax concession reductions. It's all still there for the big investors. The big investors do very well out of this budget because nothing has changed. But for those trying to get into the market, first home buyers, we know that house prices are soaring. We know how many of the purchases are made up of investors because they're doing very well out of Australia's negative gearing system, a negative gearing system that nowhere in the world seems to have like we do. So that's another fail, another squib. Now the other area that I'm very disappointed about, which really affects my home state, is in the area of health, because there are a number of people that will only be able to access a GP or a specialist if they can have that service bulk billed. And that is the whole point of a universal healthcare system. That is why Labor brought and created and brought about Medicare. But that is completely being dismantled and has been over the last while by this government. Now, in its what the journalists call a Labor-light approach, it says, no, we're going to protect Medicare. We're going to lift the Medicare freeze, and it's all going to be good because we've changed our clothing. We've now got these different clothes where we think it's okay now to protect Medicare, even though we did have our Prime Minister telling President Trump that it was good on him for repealing Obamacare, which looked a lot like Medicare, so go figure that one. So, having said that, no, there is no lifting of the Medicare freeze. We're going to have to wait at least a year and even longer, 3 years, for specialist treatments for people in serious need of their health needs being addressed by those specialists and doctors. Why couldn't you have done it now? That would have actually given you some legitimacy in this budget. But no, a failure. The other area I want to look at is the area of women's rights. Now, the Australian government used to produce a yearly women's budget statement until the Liberals abolished it in 2014. So over successive governments, including the Howe government, there was—
Senator Singh, Minister, and Senator Cameron, particularly Minister, I'm having trouble now hearing Senator Singh, so if you could accord her a little more respect, thank you. Senator Singh.
The Liberals abolished in 2014 the women's budget statement because they wanted to hide how women were impacted by their policies, by their cuts and by their spending. So I'm calling on the Liberals to bring back the women's budget statement, but of course so far this has fallen on deaf ears. So to fill the gap, Labor has been producing for the last number of years a women's budget statement in opposition, and we will do so again this year. Of course, we have a strong record when it comes to women's rights and women's policy. We brought about the first paid parental leave scheme, we developed the first national plan to reduce violence against women and children, and we invested $3 billion to increase wages in the female-dominated social and community sector. So we have a very strong record on advancing women's rights, and when next in government, make no doubt, we will bring back the women's budget statement as part of the federal government's budget. Finally, you would think that there is a policy area that simply could not be cut any more than it already has been cut over the last 3 years or more by this government, and that is foreign aid and development, budget. But yes, that in itself has been cut again. I really didn't think it could be. It's already been cut to the bone so much, consecutively, dropping by almost 30% during that time. And I remember a time when we had bipartisanship on aid and development, when we had this goal of reaching 0.5 GNI. Now, that all went out the window when Tony Abbott became Prime Minister and has continued under Malcolm Turnbull, to the extent where now we have the lowest contribution in aid and development that we have ever had. Down to 0.23 of GNI and going down, not going up, going down.